going to call this meeting to order. Chad, would you take a roll call, please?
Sure.
Or, go ahead, sorry.
Whitus. Ooh.
Here.
Fenton.
Skane sitting for Fenton.
Buckley.
Here.
Pinkley.
Here.
Yancey. Romine.
Here.
Denham. Milton.
Here.
Dobbins.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We will start with the first agenda item, approval of Finance Committee minutes for the October 28th, 2021 joint meeting. Everybody had a chance to review those? And if so, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Next item is Elevate Branson Engineering Design Firms. We'll get a staff report from Jamie.
Yes, I'm going to do the first, and then I'll ask Keith come up and explain the process just a little bit. First of all, we have a very long agenda this morning, so we tried to rearrange some of the priorities so that we could get through them. So Elevate Branson, as you all know, that we brought before the board, we received a sub-applicant for Elevate Branson, and we received approval for the $1.9 million money to help with the public infrastructure in this project. And so part of this project is to go out for a request for qualifications for engineering. And one of the things that I just wanted to say before I brought Keith up is for the grant requirements, we have to make sure that we do our due diligence as far as purchasing goes and making sure that we had everything in line so that we can say, yes, when we have our single audit next year, here are the grant requirements and here's everything that we've done. So I just wanted to preface what Keith is going to say by saying, yes, we did our due diligence. I think the city staff worked well together to go through the process. And then once Keith is done, Brian's going to come up here and talk to you a little bit about some timing constraint issues and his preference as well. So Keith, you want to come up and just explain the process for us? Thank you.
Morning, Keith.
Good morning, everybody. I'll try to make this as harmless as possible here. When it all starts out, we put together a request for qualifications with the assistance of Finance Department, and Ryan helps us with that, Ryan Hill and Jamie. And once that is prepared, then we send it out for advertisement to numerous engineering firms around the state here, and request their qualifications for this particular project. Now, we do have their qualifications on file already, but for a particular project, for something like this, we request that they send in specific qualifications for this particular project. Once we get all of those in, and I think we got 6 of them in, and I think maybe one of them had to be kicked out. Is that right, Cheryl? Because we outline in our request for qualifications how many pages they're allowed to have, you know, all the stipulations they need to meet in their submittal. So one of them had too many pages, and that's not fair to the others. You know, one guy following the rules and someone else doesn't. So anyway, we had 5 to choose from there. So we went through, graded them all, myself, Mike Woods, Kendall, and Ryan. Is that all, Ryan? I think that's right. And we grade them on our own. We go to our own offices, read through them, rate them, see who followed the rules and the best submittal, and we rate them accordingly, 1 through 5. And each category is graded on a percentage. Once that is done, we take all of those percentages, put them on a spreadsheet, average them out, and then we take the top 3 and call their references for their past projects they have done with different municipalities or developers or whoever that is. Excuse me. Once that is done, we put that into the scoring tab, and then we take those top 3, and that's what we are bringing to you all today, the top 3 companies. And no doubt in my mind, any one of these 3 companies can do the project. They're very close in their scale, their rating scales. And so I would be happy with any one of the 3, you know. Anyway, any questions I could answer? Try to make that as quick as possible.
Any questions for Keith?
I had.
Yep.
Keith, I'm looking at this memo here, and you're specifically calling out one particular proposal as being the one that you're proposing.
They did,
Sorry.
yeah, couldn't hardly hear you.
So, did that one score the highest?
In our opinions, yes, after we all took all of our scores and averaged them up, you got a 1, 2, and a 3, and I think they were the highest, yes,
Okay. So that's your recommendation based on,
correct.
so. Thank you.
Any other questions for Keith? Okay, go ahead.
Does the selection of any one of those other three adversely affect our standing with the audit as far as selecting the highest score at the lowest bid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because if they're that close together, it's just a question.
It's important for the grant purposes that we do our due diligence in the selection process that they went through. We have that documented. So that will meet the grant obligations for the audit. And so, like he said, any one of them will be selected, but based on the criteria, that's who they chose as Roselle. However, I don't think the grant we're not asking for more money. We're not asking for a change order in this case. We've simply made sure our due diligence was done with the selection process. So the answer to you is no, I don't think it'll make a difference. However, staff is recommending Roselle.
And I'll add one more thing, that when we go through engineering services selection, professional architects, engineers, whatever that may be there, we do follow our Article 6 of the City Code, which is Sections 2-381 through 385. And it's outlined, boom, 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 bullet point for bullet point, and that's what we rate these qualifications on. And it's even outlined in there what categories we have to rate them on, experience in the project, other things like that. Their locality, their demographic locality, things like that. So we follow that to the letter, and so it's, I guess the final recommendation would be up to the Capital Committee then. That's the way it's outlined in our city code then.
Very nice. Brian, you want to share a few words?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to kind of update you too. We have over 70 applicants right now for the first 24 houses. I do believe once we start pushing dirt over there, that'll increase quite a bit because people will see some activity. Just to give you a little background, in May of 2020, we applied for a $1 million grant through the Federal Home Loan Bank for the first 24 houses. We were awarded that in December of 2020, and then I believe it was May or June of 2021, we were awarded the Cdbg Grant. So we didn't apply for the Federal Home Loan Grant again because we were still in the process of the Cdbg Grant. May, that window comes up again to reapply for the Federal Home Loan Grant, which is potentially another $1 million for more houses in there. My concern is that I was really expecting us to be pushing dirt by December of this year. And granted, I know that there's been some budget things and constraints that have been more important, and our project has been pushed a little bit. So I feel like I'm up against a wall. So in front of you, I just wanted to show you that to apply for the grant, we had to have preliminary engineering done. We had to have a site plan developed, which included a survey, and one of the grant requirements was actually a Phase 1 environmental as well. All of that has been completed, and so my recommendation is CPWG, because they're already familiar with the project and they can wrap it up within 45 days. I've been assured that since they've already got the survey done, the preliminary engineering done, that they could wrap this up and get us rolling in 45 days to be ready to bring it to a request for bid for a contractor, which then moves our timeline up, because I'm really concerned that if we don't have anything happening, it's going to be hard to ask for another $1 million from the Federal Home Loan Bank. And I also think that if we do this and move it up further, I believe we can get houses on the ground in July. They're already under construction in Neosho, so they come in on a trailer, they're set on the foundation, and then we're ready to go. So that's why my recommendation would be CPWG. I'd be fine with Roselle, it's just the timing of things. So, any questions on that?
Keith, do you have any input on his request of using CPWG?
Like I said, previously, there's no doubt in my mind that they can do this project, but what we rate these qualifications on is what they submit here. Their timeline was 7 months to get it to construction phase. And that's what we based our criteria on, was 7 months. And the highest ranking one, I think, Roselle, I think theirs was 8 months. So that's what we had to rate our criteria on, based on what they submitted, not what word of mouth told us, So that's where we're coming from.
So if the final, I know the staff's recommending Roselle.
Yes, sir.
If the final recommendation was CPWG, they would meet all the qualifications and you would be comfortable with that?
I would be comfortable with it, but like I said before, I'm just going by what they
Sure.
submitted in their submittal to us.
Sure. Okay, anybody have questions on that? Go ahead.
I just have a comment, and that is the criteria used to establish who was the highest scoring proposal is now being modified by a timeline that was not part of that criteria. And so now you're asking, or this committee's being asked to choose someone other than your recommendation because of a timeline. And that seems unfair to me, to the other two ahead of this applicant, or this proposal, because they bid it right by the proposal. So that's my concern. The timeline, had it been an issue, it would have been in the proposal, and they would have all submitted it based on that. But to change that now, we're changing the eligibility criteria, in my opinion.
Well, and just, Keith might want to speak to that, but from my standpoint, the RFQ closed in September. So it seems like we could have had this selection in September, which then the timeline would have worked. But now we're 3 months down the road and we still don't have an engineer on board. And without that, we're gonna miss this window of opportunity, which is quite a bit of funding for additional houses, so.
And Brian, I appreciate that. I understand it completely. And there's no doubt, like Keith says, that any of the top three could perform this
Right.
project and complete it. My concern, and I read all three proposals yesterday, and I agreed, and I don't question staff when they make a recommendation, but I always read every proposal.
Sure.
And 99% of the time, I don't have any question about it, and they're absolutely right. And this is one of those cases where they did choose the right one. The issue of the timeline right now and how quickly the city moved through it, they moved through it as quick as they could. And the next step, based on what this committee recommends, is going to go right back to Public Works or Engineering, and they will put it out, they will negotiate a contract with whoever we recommend, and that's going to take time as well. And then they'll have to bring it back for approval based on that. They're going to recommend that contract, whoever it is.
Sure.
And as it says right in here, the process, I know you're aware of it, if they're unable to negotiate a contract with Roselle or whoever the top person is, they'll go to the next one and start the process again.
Right.
And if that one doesn't work, they'll go to the next one. And that is our process.
Yep.
Which
No, I
is
understand.
outside of your and the funding from another source. I get that.
Yeah.
But it just seems like if you're the firm making a submission and you are clearly selected as meeting the highest criteria and you're number one, and then you don't get the job, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless there's some reason.
Yeah.
And I understand your reason, but for this group, I just can't.
Now, I understand the processes.
I can't do that.
Right. My other concern is the Cdbg grant, which is the $1.9 million grant, which is really, we're the sub-applicant, the city's the one responsible on that. it has a ticking clock too. So it's 3.5 years, and if we waste a year and a half before we're even pushing dirt, it's going to be hard to get the additional funding to get everything done in time. So, again, it's just a timeline thing for me, so.
I understand. I just think the city has done everything by the book.
Sure.
And I went back through after I received this information yesterday afternoon, and I did my due diligence. I reviewed everything, and I looked at the timelines. I looked at the
Yeah, make no
RFQ.
mistake, I'm not arguing the process at all. I
Right.
think the process is fine. It's,
Right.
and had we been able to get here sooner, I don't care who we pick, you know?
Exactly.
It's just that, you know, here's an opportunity to maybe catch us back up a little bit, so.
Right. And I appreciate that.
And I understand that too. I'm like Michael though, because we set up processes and, I mean, I go through the same thing in my business, RFQs, RFPs. You don't really want to waver so much. I mean, you've got it here, everybody fit that, and I mean, I respect what you're trying to do too, but I think with what we've got in front of us now, we need to go with the recommendation.
Any other comments?
Yes, sir, I got one. Sure. The difference in scores, just for somebody who's been a laggard in all this a little bit, the difference between one and two, as far as scoring goes, was it broad, was it narrow? Just catching up
I
is all.
thought that was included in the,
Yeah, it's on.
okay, yeah, I thought it was. I mean, I've got it right here. I'll have to look at it right quick.
And the second question for Brian, would we be absolutely sure if the group decided to go with CPWG that they would live within that time frame? I mean, somebody saying something verbally versus putting it in writing is kind of tough.
That's another concern I would have, you know, without giving the rest of the consultants the same opportunity to weigh back in on their timeline. Well, maybe we can crank it out in 2 or 3 months. I don't know, you know, but that would be a concern of mine. The number one score was 4.363, and we carried these out to the nearest thousands. The number two score was Anderson Engineering, 3.819, and CPWG was 3.775. All right up there together. And like I said before, there's no doubt in my mind any of these couldn't do the project. No doubt about it. So, but that's the scores, what they were.
Selection of Roselle, would that, in the staff's opinion, slow the process down since so much has already been done? I mean, surely it's easier to pick up the ball and run with it versus getting it off the ground.
Well, they would definitely probably have to, of course, we got our 2-foot contours. They could do majority of their design off of our, you know, our 2-foot contour stuff. But as far as going out and topoing the ground, I mean, it's thick as all get out of that Christmas tree right there, out there on the ground. You
Yeah.
couldn't shoot a survey shot if you had to, hardly. But, and you know, I've done CDBG projects before when I was in consulting for almost 11 years. And you do a lot of upfront work, and back when I was doing them, back 30-plus years ago, we didn't get paid for that preliminary engineering report. So we got a lot of money invested in these projects on a CDBG project that you don't get paid for. And you do have to do a lot of upfront work, layout work, the pretty pictures, you know, the site plan, as Brian was talking about. So you do have a lot of money invested, banking on the possibility you're going to get that project down the road.
I guess my question goes back to, would the selection of Roselle slow that process down at all as far as implementing and getting to its endpoint?
We would start negotiating immediately once you all give us the go-ahead on whichever company you recommend there. We would start the negotiations next week.
Who has the bullwhip in all of this situation? Do you, the staff, have the bullwhip? Or
We
does
would negotiate a
Crack and get
contract,
moving.
but if I remember right on CDBG projects, engineering is a certain percentage of the total project cost. Is that correct? Yeah. It's the way it used to be anyway. And it was usually based on the ASCE curve, American Society of Civil Engineers, the curves there, which is range from 8 to 10% usually on a project, depending on complexity. But we would start the negotiations next week, and they may say they can crank it out quicker. I don't know.
would they be made aware through this process of the time restrictions?
The time restrictions?
Yeah, the stuff that he's set
No,
forth.
that was not in the RFQ to my knowledge.
No, I mean,
Right.
when you sit down with them, you know, we're pushed for time here. They're worried about getting access to additional money and moving forward. Would they be made
I mean,
aware?
we'll make them aware of it, but, you know, I still go back to, is this fair to the other consultants that submitted RFQs based on what they submitted?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you have an implementation schedule that you'll go through with them and,
Yeah, we will look at their schedule,
okay.
yep.
And, yeah, any other questions or comments?
So for clarification, what we approve today, then you can move forward with, or will it go to council as well, or how's?
We will negotiate the contract with the engineering company.
Okay.
And then it will come back to council.
Any other questions or comments?
Question, do we have any idea when it'd come back to council?
Hopefully the first reading in January. We will do our best to get it negotiated as quickly as possible.
Shoot. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Because that's almost 30 days between
Yeah.
those alderman meetings. Any other questions or comments? Great comments, guys.
I just have a small question. Since we have some time till January, can you go back out to the top three and throw the time limit at them and see what their response might be? Is that possible?
I don't know if that would be fair without going through all of them personally. I'd have to ask Chris to weigh in on that if he
Yeah,
wanted
and
to.
then with everybody's schedules right now around the holidays, I don't think
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that'd be rough, you know, I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but it would be a task, that's for sure, with holidays in here. And, you know, New Year's and everything else.
Yeah, my thought on that would be if you went that route, by the time you went through the entire process again, you might be further out than
Oh,
where
yeah.
we are at this
Yeah,
point.
I don't,
Probably not. It may be
disagree with that
detrimental to
bit.
the.
Correct, that's right.
Okay. We're at the point of wanting to vote on this, is that correct? So we do
We just take recommendation from the capital committee, so majority recommendation. It's what we would go with, and then they would move forward with the contract negotiations.
so would that be in the form of a vote? We would be voting for the staff recommendation of Roselle?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
If we need to.
Oh, why
go
don't,
ahead
let's
and make
try
that
that.
motion.
We can't get in trouble making motions in seconds.
No,
I'll accept a motion.
I will make the motion that we follow staff's recommendation of Roselle.
Do I hear a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Do you want a roll call vote, show of hands? What would you like? Okay,
Handshake.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you. Okay, Jamie, you'll walk us through the presentation of our regular reports?
yes, sir. So this is, these are going to be the regular reports as of October 31, 2021. So you have your sales tax here as of October, 11.4 million, which is 39.5% ahead of the previous year, which was 8.2 million. And we're even ahead of 2019, which was 9.8. And I will point out to you that at the end of October, if you look at 2021 and then go all the way across and look at it all the way across, it's the highest amount of receipts in October that we've received year-to-date. So the year-to-date is higher than the previous 10 years. And that's your sales tax. And so we're still tracking 39.5% above. And that would be for August's
Jamie,
tax
Let
generations.
me
Yes,
ask you
sir?
something, because the mayor always asks this question, and it's a good one. Do we have a significant number of laggards in that, or are we pretty well expected that we're up around 95, 98% returns reporting?
We always have laggards. I mean, I will say that. So we always have people that pay late and we have to go back in and put them back in. As far as the percentage of those, I don't have that information available, but I can go back and look at it and see. So I would assume this is pretty accurate for this time period and year, because almost every month we have laggards and you'd have to take that into consideration. So all things being equal, I think we're still sitting good as of the end of October.
For the laggards, do they move forward to November, or are they factored back into October?
Well, when we get those, so when we get the state report, they'll tell us the reporting period and when they report. So every month, it's going to be that same process. Does that make sense? So every month, you're going to see a little portion of that. So when you're looking at these receipts, these are the receipts that we received, same thing as last year, the year before. So when you're doing a comparable, you're going to have laggards in every year. So I think it's safe to look at that comparison.
So Jimmy, at each update, each monthly update, next month, we may see that October number different. Is that right? If it was
Not
due
on
in-
this report, but on the rolling 12.
the
That's the
rolling
report,
12.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Mhm. This is based on receipts.
Yeah.
Just the receipts that we receive in that month. But you're right on the rolling 12, yes, sir.
And this is, like you said, I believe August sales?
It is, It's October receipts, August sales.
Wow.
The next one is going to be the transportation, and you can see it's the half cent, and you'll be able to see we're still 40% up with them. 5.6 million versus last year, 4 million, versus the year before, 4.8 million, so we're still trending above. And we say this every month, but we still have that gap window to make up, but we are 40% above where we were last year, so that's going to help us. And then it is August, so we still have a few months of collections before we end the year here. So that's your transportation, and then we'll move forward to public
Jamie,
safety.
how close are we to getting caught up in the reserve? Pretty close?
As far as the gap, because our reserves are sitting good, and so our reserves, it was more of the operations month to month that have been our problem this year. And so the 7 million gap, we won't be able to know until the end of the year, until it'll actually be February. You know, January and February, your November and your December sales. And then when we do the audit, we take those months of capture and we accrue it back. So you'll be able to see, and we'll be able to more identify in March, once we have received all of those, how far we are with closing that gap.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next one is your public safety sales tax history. Again, 40.2% up. You can see how close transportation and your public safety sales tax collections were. Very, very close. So you've got 5.6 million 2021 versus the 4 million versus the 4.8 million. Still pretty close to being the same picture that you're looking at with transportation. But year-to-date, it's 5,675,992. Again, it's August's collections. And then this is your look at your tourism. And this will be the end of September. And just for your all's memory, we collect the tourism tax in-house, so it's not a 2-month gap, it's a 1-month gap. And so you're still looking at August's sales and September's collections here. But year-to-date, you're at a 12.4 million, which is 113% over where we were last year, due to the pandemic of 5.8 million. And then if you look at 2019, it was 9.3. So 12.4 versus 9.3 in 2019. And you look all the way across the 10 years, I think it'll give you a little bit of a good picture. Again, we do have that gap. We will be looking at that once we close out our books for the year, those kind of things. Just keep in mind, there was all kinds of things that contributed to this, but nonetheless, it's sitting at 113% greater than where we were with the pandemic, and almost 3 million more than 2019, which we considered that a good year. So I would say that's good news.
Jim, I was asked a few questions on
Sure,
this.
yeah.
And maybe there's a math calculation in here that's missing. CVB receives 25% of our tourism tax.
Yes, sir.
So the CVB says that we are projecting to give them 1.95 million next year,
That's correct.
rounding it to 2 million. 2 million would suggest that we anticipate our tourism tax to be $8 million next year. How, if we use, I don't know what would be easier, if we looked at 2019, that's $13 million, would they have received the roughly $3.2 million of marketing?
I can't remember the amount that they received in 2019, but keep in mind that's where the rollover comes in. So we always project in our budgets conservative. And so when we did the budget we were conservative. For the tourism, we were conservative. But that's where the rollover amount comes in. And so the rollover that we discuss for the chamber is we budget conservatively, and if we come in higher, which on normal years, without all these things that we've been up against last couple of years, we will. And so they'll tend to have a rollover. That rollover amount is calculated once the audit comes in, which is around June 30th, after all of those previous numbers have been calculated. So let's just use 2021, for example. So we will close the books, we will close the year after we've done our accruals after the end of February. We work in March to close those books, to true it up, then the auditors come in, they do their field work, then we create the year-end financial reports, and then that gets to June 30th when they present before the board. Once all of those, we've been tested, the auditors say, yes, this is good to go, then we turn around and we do a calculation for rollover amounts, which is, okay, here's what the chamber received, and here's how much higher we came in according to our audited figures. Then we do that calculation, and for their next budget year, we add that rollover amount into their next budget. And you will see when they present that budget, they present, here's the tax assumed, and then here's the rollover amount, and then their total revenue is that. So it would have been, I want to say around 3 million, but included in the rollover amount for the preceding year. That's how we have to do it, because one of the things that we can't do is we cannot, so say we have 1.9 million in the budget. We cannot give out or reimburse more than where the tourism tax is coming in at any given month. So we have to track that. So like last year, it was tourism obviously was hit very, very hard. So last year, we couldn't reimburse or give out any more than what we were taking in. So we have to track that as well. So we have to be extremely conservative in that area and then do the rollover. And we used to bring the rollover to the board before budget and just let them have it. And then it was requested by the chamber, let's just, for easy sake, process sake, let's just put it on the following year's budget. So that's how we have to do it. But we do project conservatively because we don't know what we're up against. For the 2021 budget, that was during the pandemic, and we did not know how we were going to sit. So that's why they got less. Now, you remember 2020, we were down 34% in our taxes. So if we're down in our taxes, they won't get rollover for the previous year. Hey, Pam. So they won't get that rollover. But then 2021, obviously, we're way up to where we budgeted. So when we close our books on June 30th and we go through that process in 2022, their rollover amount will be calculated, in which case they'll probably get quite a bit more to attach to their 2023 budget.
Okay, let me ask that a different way. Understanding that, so in 2021, what was their budget amount in 21?
I do not, hang on, let me a second, I can get that for you. The budget for 2021 was 1.6 million, 1,628,980.
And that is for that's for the year we're in.
That is for 2021, the year. Mm-hmm.
So
That was the
they were
budget.
budgeted $1.6 million,
Yeah,
and
it's a little, yeah.
just through, well, the September entry, 25% of that is, give or take, a little over 3 million. Plus, we have 2 more months to go, and looking at the previous years, it looks like it'll be, well, at least another $1 million.
The other thing you have to consider is they don't get the full 25%. The convention center gets 500,000 of that. We have to keep a reserve of 125,000 in that marketing at all times. And then we have a contingency of 125,000 as well. So they don't get the full 25%. You've got to reduce all of those and then calculate it based upon those numbers.
Okay,
So
that's
that
fair.
might be tricky.
But it still appears there's going to be more than $1 million left over from the 1.6 million budgeted, the 500 and the 125 and 125. I think give or take, we're gonna have $1 million generated into our tourism tax fund that we will not be providing to the chamber until which budget year?
Well, one more thing to consider before we go into that conversation is you got to take your TIF out of that as well. So when you bring your revenue in, that you have to net the TIF against that, because you know that for the landing 100% of that TIF that goes to your debt service, you've got to net those things as well and the admin fee. So to look at it dead on, to just say, here's a lump of money and let's do that calculation, there's many things that you have to think about. You got to remove the TIF piece, you got to remove the admin fee, and then the net revenues available is this amount, and then you have to consider that 500,000 for the convention center, and then you have to consider those 125,000 in reserve and the 125,000 in contingency, and then do that calculation. So that would be, that may be where you're getting it. But I would assume, let's just assume that it would be when the audit's done for 2021, which is June 30th of 2022, then we go through and do those calculations and we come up with the amount of what I call rollover or leftover.
Rollover, yeah.
And then we give it to the chamber, and then they put it as a line item, as an increase in their line item for their revenue. And then it'll go into effect in 2023. That's the way we just have to do it because of that. But I would assume, just in looking at the numbers, I would assume that they will get more rollover in 2022. But we got to take all these other things into consideration before we calculate that.
Okay, that still leaves 2 questions. One is, if we know what the rollover amount is after our audit in May, so we know what the rollover amount will be in June.
Yeah, so we do that calculation roughly around the end of July. So yeah, let's give or take.
So the one question is, if it was, say, $1 million, why wouldn't we offer that up to the chamber for them to use through the fall and winter marketing season?
Now, we've done that before, years and years ago. We've done that before, but it was at the chamber's request that because of the process, we just put it through because they're already in the middle of their next budget season. We just add it through to as a line item on their budget. And we would have to bring in Rachel or somebody to better explain this, but I really believe that it's because of the timing of the year of when the rollover is calculated, that it's not enough time. However, we've done it before, and so we would just bring it to the board. Once the rollover has been calculated, we would bring it to the board. The board would approve it in the form of a budget amendment, and then you would move forward. I mean, whether they attach it onto their following budget year or whether they receive it now, to me, that doesn't matter. We just need to make sure we go through the proper process. So if the chamber would like to have it earlier, that does not make any difference to me. That would be totally up to y'all.
Yeah, we must
And if
be-
it's helpful, no problem. It's just the process we have to go through.
Okay, so we'll ask that question of the chamber. So so we can move on in this meeting, would you mind providing clarity? Because you raised some very good points. Somebody looking at this chart would do simple math that I just did.
Sure.
12 million should be 3, right, 25%. Would you provide us an example of these real numbers? For example, out of the 12,455,000, we need to subtract the TIF equals X. We need to subtract the convention center, the reserve, the contingency equals X. And so that X is what we're looking at to take 25% of, not of the total 12 million for.
Yeah, we keep that model. Remember that model, I think I've shown it to you before, where we have that all the way across the revenues and all of those kind of things. So yes, I can do an example and I'll take 2021, or however you want me to do
Yeah.
it, 2019, so we leave out 2020, which was the pandemic
Yeah.
year. If you wanted me to take 2019, whichever, I'll take an example. But just remember that because of that 25%, then you also have down below the capital projects piece and all of those. And then at the end, that financial model ties back to what our comprehensive report
What would be the
says.
capital projects?
In the past, it's been multiple, like water sewer capital projects, public works.
No, I'm talking about just the marketing, the 25%
Oh,
marketing.
no, I'm just trying to tell you that the model that we
Oh, sure,
keep
sure.
does the 25% and the 75%, so you'll be able to see that.
Maybe if you could just keep it simple and just address how the 25% marketing is handled,
Sure.
then that would answer a lot of their questions.
As long as you understand that the 25% marketing will not tie back to the reserve fund for the tourism, because you have another piece that goes along in there. If that's understood, no problem, I'll present that.
Say that again?
Okay, so as long as it's understood when I just present the marketing piece, because all I'll do is just cut from our model and show that to you. You just got to understand that the way we work is we always have something to tie back to check us. The end result that we tie back to are those audited figures from the previous year. So for this model, you won't be able to tie just the marketing piece back, because there's a 75% capital piece that you will use in addition to the marketing to tie back to that previous year's
Okay,
fund
if you would
balance.
just provide a model that would be the most clear.
Okay, no problem.
Breakout.
And I don't mind, I can bring this to that next finance committee and just walk you through it too.
Actually,
It's not a
if you
problem.
wouldn't mind when you do that, maybe just email it to this committee?
Sure.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
I don't mind doing that either.
Mayor, you raised a good question, a couple good questions. Have we dipped into our reserve and our contingency, and are they full? And if they are full, just a hypothesis here, then there would not need to be any money thrown into those accounts.
Let me just make sure I understand your question.
You have the 125,000 for reserve.
Has anybody used the contingency this year? Is
Yes,
that what
ma'am.
you're asking
Well,
me?
either one. If the reserve is being maintained and it's full, and the contingency has not been touched, then none of the money from 2021 would roll in there to fill up any type of monies taken out in 2022. They'd be full. It's just a hypothesis.
Yes, we try, that's where we get the rollover in the calculation, that 125 reserve has to be maintained full.
I get
So
that.
we'll keep that one separate. But the contingency, that's out there all year for businesses to be able, nonprofits to be able to apply for. As it stands this year, I don't think we've had any applications. I've sent a couple out with businesses requesting that, but so far, nobody's requested any of that.
I got you. Then the other side of it, excuse me, I call them rollover, carryover. Regardless of whether we give the money over to the CVB, whichever comes in, they can decide to roll that over as well into the next year instead of trying to pound sand towards the end of the year, because sometimes when you have as somebody who served on the tourism district, we have really not wanted to throw more money at the market that would truly benefit the community. But the question is, once they get it, they can decide to roll that over to 2000 in 22 or 23, as it may be.
Well, actually, that's through reimbursements, and so
Gotcha.
we give them the amount, and they spend that amount in reimbursement. And actually, for our year-end process, we have to have all of their invoices
Right.
and everything returned to us by the end of the third week of January in order to move forward with closing our books.
See, that my hypothetical really gets into a gray area. If they don't spend it, it sits on our books. And it would be another,
It would be part of the next year's
Yes, ma'am.
rollover. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
the way the calculation
But they
works.
would have the option, if they wanted to spend something for fall or Christmas, turn in the receipt by the third week of January, right? But it would be their choice.
Yes, and then if they don't use it all, I think to your point, it will drop back into the next year's rollover. That does make sense, sure.
thank you for
Good
commenting
question.
that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the part that goes over the rollover into the next year, can they use that anytime at the beginning of the next year?
I mean, that's for their discretion, so they provide us a budget, and they provide us a very detailed line item budget on how they're gonna spend that, like 75 for veterans and, so on and so forth. And so, we've done it both ways. So several years ago, I will say, it was more vague, and here's the line item, and they were able to freely move it between line items if they needed to do that. Now with a more detailed budget, if they need to not spend as much in this line item and spend more in this line item, they typically have to ask because it's a budget, it's approved budget. But if we gave them, okay, here's your budget amount, it gives them a little bit more liberty to move freely within those categories. Did I answer your question? So this year, though, it was a more detailed category budget. So they need to stay within the confines of those specific categories unless they come back and say, hey, we need to do a budget amendment or something like that. And that's totally acceptable.
But it
as
never
well.
loses its identity, I think, is the question that needs to put the
Right, I
period
mean,
at the end of it.
it's all through reimbursement, so we have to audit all of it, so it has to go for what they've said it would go for. So, yeah, you're right, you're correct.
I think one of the problems is that, because that isn't tallied until the middle of the year or whatever, then that leaves just part of the year to try to spend those funds where they feel like if they could have those dollars earlier, then they would know how to, they could do more planning for spring, summer, instead of waiting till the end.
And I believe that's why they elected to go with it, to put it on the following budget, because it just makes it cleaner for them to plan. So they'll know the rollover, and then they can plan for, they'll know the rollover in 2022 and can plan for 23 budget. And I believe it just made it cleaner for them. But that would be up to them and their preference,
Well,
I
what
would say.
complicates this whole thing is the tourism district is collecting so much more than what they had budgeted for. And my question would come to be, and it doesn't have to be discussed in here, but the first in, first out, whose has to be spent first? The tourism district, let's say they carry over $1 million, and their allocation is $9 million, and that takes it up to $10 million.
So when you say tourism district, are you referring to TCED? Or are you
Yes.
referring to city tourism?
No, when I refer to the tourism district, it's always TC.
Okay, so the city doesn't give money to the TCED?
I know.
Okay. So that would be up to them and
Yeah.
their guidelines on how they do that.
So, Jimmy, you
I
said
don't
we,
think she understands what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm sorry. What, am I not understanding what you're asking?
No, how do we treat this? Is it first in and first out? Does the tourism district expend dollars and then we can get reimbursement from the city? I think that needs to be cleared up because I'm getting
It's the
questions.
chamber that expends those dollars, and we give them, the chamber, our marketing dollars, and then they expend it. Then however they expend it throughout the year, they reimburse. They turn in all of their documentation and their payments to us. We audit that, and then we turn around and pay them according to the budget guidelines that we were given.
Right, it's all a cost reimbursement contract.
is, absolutely
I
is.
think that needs to be clear
Yes.
for the public that watches.
Okay.
It's not an advance.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't understand you
That's
before.
okay, never mind.
Hey, Jamie?
Yes, sir.
Quick question. You mentioned something a while back, that if you didn't collect enough tax to pay them, what happens then? And the big thing in my mind is in 2020, you didn't collect enough tax to pay for the budget. So what happens in that situation? Does that
It's the
roll
s-
over? Or
It's
does
the
that
same
get
for all the
lost?
cities. I mean, it would be the same for any department in the city. Like we had to go through and we had to do our cuts and our freezes and all of those kind of things. At the end of the year, the tourism was down 34% in total. So yes, they would have to reduce their expenditures because they would have to understand that they're not going to get as much because of that purpose. So 2020 was obviously an anomaly for us, but it was not in just the tourism. It was all across the city. So we all had to make those serious cuts and go back to the drawing board and figure out how we were going to be able to operate with a lot less.
But you don't have to make up the difference. It's just,
No,
we're done
and-
this year, we're starting fresh. No
Right, because of
carryover.
the rollover, because in 2020, we were down 34%.
Right.
There won't be a rollover.
Makes sense. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
You're welcome.
And also remember, they get funding from the tourism district, which is a substantial amount to help that out. So any loss that we had could have been covered by carryover or rollover from the tourism district the previous year.
Yeah, I was at a TCD meeting yesterday, and just round numbers, the total amount of TCD tax revenue is right around 9.7 million. And out of the 9.7, if I recall, 6.5 million goes to actual marketing. Yeah. And where 100% of ours goes to the marketing. Thank you, Jamie.
I had one,
Sure.
just real quick, kind of just to test your memory on this particular chart. Because I don't remember this, I was here, but I don't remember this, but 2019, we've already established it was a really good year, right? Right?
Yes.
And that's at 9.3. These are August
Yes.
dollars. So
Yes.
what I can't figure out is why 2018 was 9.7, 2018. Did we have something crazy good going on in August of 2018?
Well, 2018 was a good year, too.
2018, if I remember right, Labor Day fell on the 1st, so part of that weekend fell into August.
And you have to think of some of the businesses that we opened up, some additional tourism attractions, and all of those kind of things will also play a part into this. So when we have economic development and we have those businesses come in, that also plays a part into the ups and downs.
It'll show up in the next chart that shows hotels, motels, theaters, restaurants, attractions, and campgrounds, correct?
Yes, the categories, sure.
I just thought it was interesting that it was higher in 2018, and 19 was a great year, but it was lower. So I think Jamie's probably, that's how Labor Day fell.
And, yeah, and I would just always encourage, look at it in total. That'll help you weigh out those timing issues.
Thank you.
Okay, are you ready to go to the next one? Okay, so here is your categories, what Mr. Skanes was just talking about, and the categories and how it lays out in your increases in your departments. And is there any questions on that one?
Yeah, could you leave that up just a second? Wow.
The point for us to put in the 2019 was so that you could see a more common year. I say common or, yeah, so 2020 was an anomaly, but it's important for you to have something else to gauge it by.
Thank you for doing that,
Yeah.
Jamie.
So the drop in 19, look at the big increase in hotels and motels in September of 19, 550 grand.
So are there any more questions on that, or do you want me to pause for
Go
a
ahead,
second?
no, you can go ahead. I can put my glasses on, read the smaller.
I understand. Okay. Okay, we can keep moving. The next one's the rolling 12, which we talked about earlier. The first page you'll see is your monthly tax receipts, and then the next one you'll receive is the actual retail sales. This is the one where we talk about we have to put it back into their actually reporting category. So this is the one that we referred to as it will change. When we get those, they tell us what the reporting category is, and we go back and we put them in. So you'll see July as if we ended. This is how the year would pan out. July over July, assuming a full 12 months, but this is your tax receipts, and this is how we have to handle that. And it's just more a gauge for overall economy, how well we're really doing in the economy, and that. This one's actual tax receipts. The next one is retail sales and your growth. Overall, your total growth, if we did a 12-month ending in July, is a 28.5%, July over July. So that you can gauge the growth in your economy, and this is a retail sales reporting, okay? Excuse me. Okay, and then the next one, we can keep trying, we've got quite an agenda, so I'm going to try to keep moving if there's no more questions. The next one is your non-restricted to TIF payments, and this is your report for your sales tax, and we always go back down to year to date, and you can see that we have an increase of 2.6 million outside of the TIF districts. And again, you can always look, and we give you those 10 years of information so that you can view that as well. But it's important for you to see outside of the TIF districts, how is the rest of the city doing? And I think you can say it's doing pretty well. The next one is your tourism one as well, and then you can gauge that one as well. And we've talked about tourism quite a bit, but I will tell you that it's still the same gauge outside of the tourism districts, TIF districts, excuse me, just so you can remember that for the landing TIF, it's 100%. The Hills TIF is your 50%, and every other TIF is 50% except for that landing. So that's why we like to report that to you so you can see that. Obviously, 5.4 million over the TIF districts. That's quite good for this time of year. So we can keep moving here as well. The next one is your monthly budget. And so we do this one, and I hate to keep being redundant, but I just like to explain why we do some of these things. This is your monthly budget report. Because we are a tourism town, we can't just take a monthly budget, straight line it across 12 months, and call it, this is how we're gonna do in this month and this month. We do that on your income statements. We give you a gauge for that 12-month straight line. But this is a report to show you, we take 5 years of the previous history, we establish a 5-year percentage of where in what month, what percent we think should be coming in, and then we show you where it's coming in for you to gauge how we are doing monthly in terms of your budget. So if you look at your 2021, this is your sales tax receipt, 11.4 million, we are 45% more than we thought we would be over the budget. So we are doing better than anticipated. We assumed 9.5 million for 2021 budget. We're already at almost 11.5 million. So you can see that. And that helps you gauge month to month in terms of budget process where we should be at. The next report will show you the same thing, just a different funding source. The tourism as well, you can see that. 7.3 million assumed, we're already at that 12.4. And there's a lot of things you can talk about in terms of economic development and how we are in this year versus last year and even over 2019. But one of the things we'll begin talking about next year is what we should not do is anticipate the same large growth that we're having this year. We should not assume that we're going to have that same thing next year. So just as a heads up, when we begin talking about next year and all of the progress and those kind of things, we need to make sure and keep it in the back of our minds. While we're having 113% increases and all of those kind of things, I don't think it's a sustainable market for next year to look at that.
Jamie, just for clarity on that.
Sure.
When I look at our 2022 budget that we've been discussing, in that budget is our projection, I recall our projections are 1% increase over 2021.
Actually, for 2022, I believe we took it as a 20% increase for the sales tax
the
and
sales
stuff.
tax was
Yes, because we
20%.
were trying to get it back up. If you recall, we were stair-stepping it back up to where we were for conservative purposes.
Okay.
So yeah, it was quite a bit higher than 1%.
So 2022, we're anticipating a 20% increase over 2021.
Yes, and that 20% increase just came from us trying to get it back up to where our normal market was. Because we were conservative previously.
Okay,
Yes.
fair enough.
And
Thank
that
you.
was through analysis of prior years.
It was absolutely through the analysis of prior years, yeah. You won't see me doing that very often because I like to keep it conservative, and then if we do better, yay. But this year, we needed to true it up and make sure we were back online in trends. Okay, we can move forward. And then the next one is your normal financial reports. And I'll try to move quickly through these. And if you, because we have some budget amendments and some other things that I want to talk about, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. So this is your general fund, 19.2 million in revenues as of the end of October 31 versus 15.5 in 2020 and 18.3 in 2019. You can see one of the questions that we've had in previous board meetings was interest income. So I'm going to point this out for a little while so it's just fresh in everybody's mind. We do separate the interest income and we do report it separately so that you can see that. There's a line item specifically for interest income. Even in the time where the market went down and we aren't earning as much, we are still earning quite a bit more than what we had anticipated budget-wise, so you can see that as well. And the request came to us, we want to be able to see our investments in a spreadsheet in a report, and we're hoping to bring that to you in the Finance Committee in January. Okay, so then your expenditures are 6.9 million versus 7 million in 2020 and 6.7 million in 2019. And then your other financing sources, and this is where when I talk about your transfer ins and your transfer outs, they're categorized as another funding, another financing source. A lot of the debt transfer outs, you'll see here, the subsidies, all of those will be categorized down here under other financing sources. So we have the park subsidy, we have the public safety subsidy. We also have the convention center subsidy, all of our debt transfers out to your Tif debts, those kind of things are all included in that. So if you want to scroll up, I'll show you your unreserved fund balance as of the end of October is 10.3 million. And this one is a look at your public safety fund, and remember, this is your fund summary, so this will encompass both police and fire, and then we also separate that out so you can see them individually as well. So we're sitting at total revenues of 5.8 million as of the end of October. For 2020, it was 4.5 million. In 2019, it was a little more than 5 million. And your expenditures, if you want to scroll down, your total expenditures are 8.1 in total, 9 million last year and 9.8 the year before. Okay, and then your other financing sources, that would be your subsidies as well, your internal service transfer outs, your subsidy in from the general fund, those are all accounted for in that category. And both together, in summary, they're sitting at an 8.1 fund balance.
Jamie, just a real quick question.
Sure.
I know it's bogging down. Where is the line item for rollover or carryover from the previous year? Or is there an item in that particular item? Or is it just 12 months that we're looking at?
So you have your, can you ask me that again? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking me.
That we had budgeted 9 million, but we actually collected 9.8 million, and we didn't spend it. We had $800,000 to carry over in that restricted fund. Where is that shown?
That net difference will just be in your reserve balance.
Thank you.
So your revenues minus your expenditures drop down into your reserve balance.
Appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Okay, we can move on. This is a look at your police, your revenue, and remember, this is the first year that we split them, and it was an internal, so you could split them, because at the end of the year for your comprehensive financial reports, it's one fund. It rolls up into one fund. But we want to give you this, so next year you'll have some history backing on just police and fire. That's why those two columns are blank. So you've got, $3.2 million in revenue, and then 4.6 million in expenditures. And if you scroll down, you'll see your subsidy coming in, and your total financing sources for an unreserved fund balance of 4.4 million here for the police department. And then the next one is your fire department, and the same thing goes for that. You're 2.6 million in revenue, and you're about 3.5 million in expenditures, and then you have your other financing sources and your income from the general fund, and you're sitting at a $3.6 million reserve right there. And then those two total up to be that one police public safety fund summary.
Jamie, I'm sorry, would you scroll back
Yes, sir.
right there? So that line item, operating transfer in from general fund, the 2.15 million, that is a percentage of the total 7.6.
That is the percentage of the I can't remember the total. Remember, this year their subsidy was reduced. Next year for 2022, we brought it back up to 7.6.
Right, thank you.
Excuse me. What you doing? Oh, no. Okay. All
We
right.
figured we'd have air conditioning in December, huh?
Okay, so this is the convention center, and so you'll see your total revenues are at 3.3 million versus last year they were at 1.8, and the year before at 4.5. And it gives you your categories, and then your expenditures at 3.4 million versus last year 2.9 and 4.5 in 2019. Again, your other financing sources are your transfer ins, and that transfer in of 316,000 from the general fund so far, and your transfer in from your tourism, and that is your marketing piece. So you're sitting at an unreserved fund balance right now of 596,000. The next one's going to be a look at your tourism fund. And so this is your taxes and your franchise and your services. So you're at 13.8 million for revenue versus last year 6.7 versus the year before 10.4. So you can see that we're still up in revenue. Your expenditures, can you scroll down? Thank you. You can see your marketing piece, you can see your admin, you can see the debt service and principal. It's important to note, remember the last debt service payment off of tourism is in January of 2022. So I mention that quite often because I think that's an accomplished goal, so we're excited about that. So your other financing sources are the same thing, your transfer outs to your marketing dollars for the Tif purposes, and the transfer in from the CID, them paying us back over time. And it's 1.6 million this year. We budgeted 500,000, but remember they paid for the undergrounding, and that's where that's coming in from. We have to set up a capital project. We have to do the expenditures through that capital project so we know the total cost of that one capital project, and then they reimburse us for those dollars. Okay, so that's why you say.
What happens to those monies? Do those go back into the reserve as well as it go back to the original line item?
No, that offsets the expense that's already been expended. So the net effect should be to that fund zero, because they've approved, they're going to spend this much, and they're going to reimburse the city for this much. So the net effect should be zero. And then they give us back the $500,000 that they elect in their budget to reimburse us for that 9.2 agreed upon monies. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Just wanted to make it clear for folks
Sure.
that watch this to
Absolutely.
understand.
Yep, thank you.
Jamie, in your department, has there been any discussion, actually, let me see if I clarify so we're on the same page. We had a reduction in our bond rating, so we didn't want to take out new debt for infrastructure. That, thanks to your help, got us back up to where we were for our rating. Community just approved the extension of the 4% tourism tax.
Yes, sir.
So now our bond limit is whatever, 90 million? 92 million.
93, something like that.
And maybe this isn't your department.
That's okay, I'll
I'm
tell
looking
you.
at where, we have $92 million that is our new bond capacity.
Okay,
Tourism tax, the 75% that goes to infrastructure is doing quite well. What's the process of having discussions of when it would be prudent to start using that borrowing power we have now for roads, infrastructure?
sure, that's a good question, because we were waiting until the end of the middle of next year when they were actually going to do their S&P review to get our credit rating maybe
Right.
even higher than what we had ended with. They did our review earlier. They bumped us back up to where we were, which we were extremely thankful for, and then they wrote that report. Now, we can probably do that right now, and that would be between city management and you all's discussion on what you all wanted to do as far as priorities and priority-based budgeting and how that fell. But what we do know is that if we're paying off a debt in January as well, you want to make sure you have the highest amount of credit because it's the cheapest way to borrow the money. So we're paying off that debt. We paid off the COPs in December after the S&P report, and we're going to pay off that bonding debt in January. So that, I can imagine, will only have a more positive effect on our credit. And we had talked to them, and they had told us that they may come back next year too and do another rating because we had told them these things were coming up. So it would be up to you all to say, this is what we want to do, but you want to make sure you have the best credit rating in order to have the cheapest borrowing
Yeah, so I know,
power.
I guess the point was, I know we were waiting for that date, which was
Yes.
going to be mid-next year.
It was,
We've
certainly.
achieved it, so Stan, we can put that on the list of things to start talking about?
We put it on that list about 2 months ago. It's already there.
Very nice. Potholes are on that list?
Potholes, new water lines, all kinds of things.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny.
And one thing that might help you is in the 2022 budget, we also assumed moving money from tourism to transportation to help with the street overlays and those kind of things. We already did that, so that's good too. Okay, the next one is the transportation fund. For 2021, at the end of October 31, you're looking at 6.1 million in revenues versus 4.4 million in 2020 and 5.2 in 2019. If you'll scroll down to your expenditures, and then you
Excuse me,
have,
Jane.
yes, sorry.
We have a request for
Oh.
a restroom break.
Okay, sure.
Would y'all mind if we took a break for a few minutes? Let's be back in 6 minutes. Thank you. wanted everybody to hear my timer's gone off.
the middle of it's broken.
Oh, it's, yeah. Can't afford it.
Mayor says come back into order.
6-minute timer's gone off.
You don't have your gavel today. Keep in mind.
No. Jerry?
Mayor's calling us back to order, guys.
Thank you for the interruption, Jamie. We'll resume the meeting.
Okay, will you scroll down, please? I'm not sure which one we were on. Transportation, so we'll move on. The next one was your Tif debts, and that's kind of, Tif money goes in and then it goes back out to debt. And we'll try to move through these unless there's any questions.
Just
Then-
real quick to
Yeah,
understand.
sure.
If you get money in faster, it pays the debt down faster? Is that what we're
Well,
showing here?
you have your debt schedules, and so what happens is when the money comes in, then it goes to your debt service fund. And certain bonding dentures have abilities to do like mandatory redemptions and stuff if the money's flowing better than expected. And so we just have to follow all those bonding criterias. But when the money comes in, it all goes into the debt service fund. If it's not spent based on their AM schedule, then it goes into that reserve fund. And so when those are built up and when the bonds come available and when we do the mandatory redemptions, that's where all that comes from. So all the money comes out, according to the TIF, comes out of the general fund, and then it goes into your debt service funds, and then it's spent according to the bond docs and what we're allowed to
11.6
do.
is good.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And the reserve amount in this fund is?
Scroll down, so we're at 21.8 million. Keep in mind, the debt service reserves, you have certain bonding indentures that have debt service reserves in there as well. But yes, so far, we're doing okay with this. And you'll see later, we're gonna bring a refinancing before you, an opportunity to save money and time. So, excuse me. The next one is another debt service fund. And this was separated years ago. We point this out. This was part of the Branson Meadows. The Branson Meadows TIF, that Branson Meadows TIF ended in 2018. However, there was debt service still against it, so we still keep putting the money in there and paying that.
I'm sorry, Jamie, would you go back to the previous?
Sure,
Just
absolutely.
to the
Well,
balance right there.
yes,
Would you mind adding a line item under the unreserved fund balance?
Okay.
Inserting an amount of how much we're required to have in capital reserves?
in the debt service
In the
reserves?
debt service reserve, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I guess what I'm
So
looking,
like your debt service reserve requirement, so I would say all of it's required because it's TIF money, so when the money comes out, in the sales, it's just a flow through. It comes, all of the money hits the general and then it flows through, whether it's 100% TIF or a 50% TIF, and we do all those calculations with all of our reports, and then it flows through to this debt service fund. All of it is required and it's obligated to that debt. It's just when does it get paid? Some of it is a debt service reserve based on a $3 million reserve or whatever that bonding denture requires. But I would say all of it is required. So what, maybe knowing that, what else would you
okay,
like for
so
me to do?
I guess the real question would be, would there be any monies in our reserve account that we could use, that we could put to work by reducing one of the debts, which would reduce our payments?
Sure. I think I understand what you're saying. The only way you can do that is based on those redemptions that I was talking about,
Sure,
because it's
sure.
all based on those bond docs.
Yeah.
But yes, if that money builds up, then essentially what happens, and like the Branson Landing, they have that waterfall flow of funds in which you have those 3 bonding indentures that are wrapped up in that. So if we meet all 11 steps for that then it rolls back onto the next bond, and then it rolls back onto the next bond. And this year, and we bring budget amendments for you to show you how much it's rolling down and rolling over to pay that next debt. So it works very smoothly, but there's just certain requirements that we have to follow. So if it builds up to that point and we meet those steps, we did a flow chart years ago to kind of explain the waterfall flow of funds. And it helps you see, this year, I think we're sitting at around $1.8 million that flowed all the way down to the fourth bond. And so it is doing quite well this year, and we just need to maintain it. But for that, we cannot just take that money and spend it unless, like we pay off a debt. So the debt we're getting to pay off in January of 2022, that has a required debt service amount. I apologize, I can't remember the dollar figure, but that has a required debt service amount that we had to hold for that debt.
Absolutely.
Once that's paid off, then that debt service reserve amount will be released. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
And that would be another way that you could capture that and pay it. And I think that would go back into the tourism fund, and we're going to bring all of that before you when it happens and as it happens. But so that would be another way that you could do that. And then your redemptions on the bonding requirements, that would be another way you could do that. But it's not like we just can't capture that fund and say we want to pay this debt off earlier, because they all have dates in which you can pay them down and those kind of things.
Sure. So when you said you're going to bring this to the board in January?
Sure. So when we pay off of that, and it depends on when they give it to us, because there's a process of which they have to go if they release that debt service reserve. Certainly, once they release that and where it goes, it'll come back before this committee even prior to that.
Right.
We'll keep you informed as to this is how much we got. The debt service reserve was released. And this is where it went.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
Yes, sir. And then the capital projects fund is the next one, and that is for your particular capital project. It's not a lot going on in there. We budgeted 1.9, we have 1.2. Expenditures so far for those projects that are going on in there. Your ending reserve balance in that capital project fund right now is $851,000. The next one is your cemetery fund, perpetual fund. There's not a lot that happens in that. The next one, the biggest one, Parks and Rec Fund is coming up, and you'll see they're at 1.9 million in revenues as of the end of October 31st versus 2020 at 1.2 versus 2019 at 1.7. I always show you, look at the campground and look how much revenue has been generated by the campground versus last year and even 2019. So you're quite a bit higher than even your 2019, which I think that is a good picture of how that Parks and Rec Department has managed their funds.
Thank you, Cindy.
And then you can see that the expenditures are a little over the 2 million in 2020, 1.7, and 2.1 in 2019. So while they got more revenue than 2019, they've spent less money as well than 2019, right?
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, and so then their ending reserve fund balance as of the end of October is 1.4 million. I'm not trying to go I'm just trying to get the agenda done, so yes,
I
sir.
understand.
That's okay.
On that unreserved fund for 1.4 million for Parks and Rec, I'm not sure, and I know we don't have time to discuss it, I'm not sure how much of that is, Parks and Rec, does it have a 10%
Yes,
required
sir.
reserve?
It has a 10% required reserve.
Are there those amounts that we could put to use?
Certainly. So what we typically do is after the end of the year, and we know where they're sitting after the end of the year, we will bring it back before the Finance Committee and back before the board, because what we like to do is take their excess over and above their requirement. A lot of the times we have to keep 15% in there. Because what happens is it'll reflect in the next year. So if we don't keep a little bit more than that 10%, you may drop the year before. But then we'll bring it back before this committee and then back before the board to say, here's how much excess they have left in their reserve. We would like to keep this amount in their reserve fund and then move the rest of it to their internal service fund so that they can build up, so all their repairs needed or their extra capital or anything that they need to do, that they don't have to come back and offset their operations with those. It's being built up for use on their.
So they could use that for like neighborhood parks?
Yeah,
example.
For building up for repairs, maintenance, extra things that, yes,
Very nice.
absolutely.
Thank you.
The next one is your water sewer fund. This is your main fund, and you see their water revenues. We did separate this year out the penalties and interest because we've had so many questions about that. It's a little tricky, so we separated that out. The sewer, 4.8 million versus 3.9. Our consumption is at least, I believe, you'll see it on the consumption reports, about 20% higher. And then we did those increases at the beginning of 2021. So their total revenue is 9.5 million versus last year was 7.7 versus the year before 7.7 as well. So they are doing quite a bit better than they had in previous years. The expenditures are 10.2 million versus last year 9.6 and the year before 9.9. I always like to say, just keep in mind that we did the raises and all of those kind of things you have to consider there. So if you look, they also have depreciation on their line items as well, and some of those things can be factors in that. So your total expenditures are 10.2 and 9.6 last year and 9.9 the year before, and they're really close to 2019. And then here is your net change in your fund balance, and then you see your total other financing sources here, and that's a water sewer capital. We budgeted for $250,000 to go out of that. So far, we haven't moved that. We only move it when it actually happens. And so it hasn't happened yet, so you'll see that move in months to come. And then their ending reserve balance is at 65.5 million. Reminder there's about 9 million in there. The rest of that is assets. Okay, I just always like to point that out. I know we went over that in detail in the budget, but I think it's important to just always note that you don't have 65 million of use. A majority of that is your investment in assets.
Again, Jimmy, can we add that to this monthly
Yes, sir.
update?
Yes, so what I can do is I will put out we can just add like a little line item below and just maybe show like your net
Absolutely.
investment. Will that
Yes,
work?
that'd be great.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Jamie, excuse me, did you cover the combined statement?
The water sewer operating capital? This one, 620 operating, and then you'll see down below, you'll see the 145 capital, and then the 146 is your small operating capital for water sewer. Is that what you're asking me? Or the combining statement for your government?
That.
Yes, I typically go past that, but if you want
Okay.
me to touch, I just typically go past it because we've already gone through each one of those in detail. You want me to cover that? I don't mind to, certainly. So then below that, you'll have your capital funds. The 145 is the large project capital that we separate that. Typically, you have the sewer system connection charges that go in that and tourism. And then your 146 is more based on your smaller capital projects, and that is based off of operations, and that's that money based off of your operations. So that typically comes out of the water sewer main operating fund. So that would be your difference between your 146 and your 145. Tourism funded versus operational funded. And then the next ones are your internal service funds, and those are just the amounts that come out. And you see we have one for water sewer, we have one for general fund, we have one for public safety, we have one for parks, and we are happy to get these started because it's a really good opportunity to move these funds over to allow the departments to budget for those needs and those maintenance and those repair schedules and those kind of things without it always affecting their next year's operations. So I thought it was a really important thing for us to do, and I think the departments are managing them extremely well. So that is your income statements in a nutshell. And I'm happy to go through anything else with you. I was just trying to move forward. We have also that cash by fund report that shows you the cash that we have in the bank versus what we're showing you on your income statement. And I always say this, you probably could memorize this, but That's a way to check me as you look at your income statements, your fund balance and your income statements will tie back to your balance sheet. And then those balance sheets will also tie back in cash total and your cash to your operating cash by fund. And you can see that. So we have a major operating cash, which is, we call it the savings, but it encompasses all of these different funds. Then we have your public safety one, and then we have your tourism fund, because they are your special revenues. And so you can see where we keep it all, how it's done, and then it'll be important to note your investments are on there as well. So that is your financial reports, and you can see all of those.
Jamie, just a
Yes,
quick
sir.
question. Are
Absolutely.
the reports that we have seen so far, in your erstwhile opinion, that would help us going forward as far as our ability to see an improved bond rating? Or it would have a significant positive effect on that?
The reports, is that what you're asking me?
Everything we've seen today is good.
Yes, sir.
So when the people look at, or the organizations look at improving our bond rating, what they'd be looking at, they'd be more, how to say this without saying it. It's more positive as far as getting a better bond rating. There's nothing negative in this that I have seen that would keep our bond rating at the same or drop it.
Sure. If I were to work for one of the bond raters and I were to see this, I would say it's definitely moving in the right direction. So it's important. They typically pull the comprehensive, the audit reports are extremely important to the bond raters, to the investors, and that's why we do such a detailed one. And they typically pull that. They'll pull what's already been audited for their own assurance. But yes, sir, I would say you would see this always going in a positive direction. Now, if the pandemic was a different story, and I think we saw that, and so I think we're seeing a lot in our historical. We've had tornadoes, we've had floods. How does this impact us? How does this impact us? Now we've had a pandemic, and what do we need to do to secure the city, to maintain through all of these different things? And I think it's historical, and it's teaching us what we need to do, but also I think that this year is a good picture of how we are bouncing back. Now, again, I will say, we still have that gap, and we'll be able to tell you how much of that gap we were able to close once the year closes and we do those calculations.
So Jenny, and I know we need to wait for the end of the year, my preliminary calculations say that the effect of the pandemic, I mean, our revenues dropped significantly for the pandemic, but my preliminary numbers say we made up that entire loss in 1 year.
If we keep going, because we're just at August,
Yeah, I
but
think
if
we're
we
gonna-
keep going, there's a good chance that we could close in on a lot of it.
Yeah, because I know when we first started the pandemic and none of us knew nothing,
Right.
you made a comment a few times that for every 1 month, it's going to take us like 5 months, which was which was practical.
Yes.
I think it is remarkable that we were able, because I was thinking it was going to take us a couple, 3 years to catch back up. But to catch back up in that 1 year, I'm just tickled pink.
Jerry and I were talking about this at the break. There's a whole lot of factors that go into that. But yes, sir, I think, you know, there's a lot of families that were able to take vacations this year that may not have normally been able to take vacations and all of those kind of things because of the extra money that's been pumped into the economy. So I think those are all important factors that we could not have assumed.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
Yes, absolutely. So hopefully we'll see that close, and we'll continue to watch that and look at that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, and so the next ones, actually, I think, Mayor, I think you asked us to put this on, and I almost forgot about this, the CID report. So the CID financial report, we included this in your packet, so I just wanted to, we go over this with the CID, and we try to send it out between the 25th or the 30th of every month to the CID. Here is a look at October 31st for the CID financials. Your total revenues are at 4.1, and you'll see quite a bit of a gap here, but that's because we annexed the whole thing in, and you're starting to see the revenue from that before it was just a small piece. of that 5 miles. So you can see that, and that's where your difference in your revenues come in. And then you have your expenditures here. They're at 59,000 versus last year at 65 and the year before at 67. There haven't been a whole lot of capital items and expense coming this year, but you can see, you'll look down at your other financing sources and you can see that 1.2 million for undergrounding that's come out, plus the 500,000, there's about 416 that they've already given to us. Those kind of things always come out. So they're sitting at, if you want to scroll up so I can see, the 4.2 million fund balance as we stand. And what we've done for the CID, we looked at, I can't remember how many years going out, but I'll get that. I'm sorry, I should remember that. But we did a cash flow for them going out so that they could see, okay, what this will affect this and what this year's, the undergrounding, how that will have an effect on next year, and so on and so forth. So they do have that, and we have talked about that as well. So there is your 76 CID financial report. And if it's important, we'll just add it to our packet and keep bringing it to this committee.
Yep.
So Jamie, the difference you're seeing for 2021 versus 2020, 2019 is we finally were able to get the entire district. We had to get everybody's permission and all that stuff, and so those all got tallied and certified and everything. So now it encompasses the entire district, correct?
It does, the entire approved
That's
district.
the difference.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
Okay.
And for clarity, correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
I think something that's important for all of us to know is the improvements, what we're talking about on the CID committee is roughly 1.8, 1.9 million on this next phase we're talking about.
For the undergrounding, are you talking about?
Undergrounding
Okay.
utilities, yeah, which is a city responsibility. The CID owed the city, give or take, $9 million,
Yes, sir.
and they were gonna pay that back to the city, I believe it was $500,000 a year until that was paid off. To be able to move this project forward, the CID has agreed to reimburse the city 1.9 million out of the 9 million that they owe us, but they've agreed to reimburse the city the 1.9 million from the CID fund, transfer that to the city, so then the city can pay for these improvements that we're responsible for. So I just want everybody to be aware that we're getting to be able to move forward with this, but it's not coming out of our city's budget, it's coming out of the prepaid funds that the CID owed.
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
So after they've paid this back, it's down to about 7.5 million that they still owe.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The next reports, I believe, that are on there are just those informative reports that I like to keep in front of you. Business license reports, the purchasing that we've sent out, and then your water and sewer, your consumption reports. Those are just for your benefit, and they're just informative reports that we started doing this year just so you could see some of the other aspects of what's going on in the finance department. The next one, let's see, what's the next one? The next one is your present, we've already gone through the public safety financials, but this is that graph that we updated last time. It won't change until the end of this year, until we update it after auditing. But it's important for you just to see it and know it. If you don't want to see it anymore, just let us know. But we want to make sure that we keep that front and center because that'll be important for the discussions that are coming in January and February and so on and so forth. The next ones we do have to have an approval on because those are the disbursements, $15,000 and over.
Jamie, are there any of those that you want to provide some input or some clarity on?
And if you have any questions, absolutely. The debt, that's the energy performance debt, you all know that we refied that to save about $85,000 off of that, and we reduced it 3 years, so we'll be done paying that off, I believe, in '23. So that's that debt payment. Obviously, the vehicle lease piece and your electrical bills. Let me see, I'm trying to think of this, if there's anything that would be standing out that would be extraordinary. When I was reviewing this, I didn't see anything, but Is there anything that you all may have questions on?
Just hit the last item, the 8888. What is the security bank?
That's the P card purchases, so we have that P card program. That's accumulated total of the P card. And what we do is the next report, I think it was asked several years ago, if there's any amount that goes over 15,000 one-time spend, that we present that to you all if it's paid with P card. Remember, every time we use our P card, we save 1.39% that we get back into our bank. So it's important to use that because it's cash back, right? So we encourage that, and you can see this one item, it's already been taken, the centrifuge for the pump. I believe that's water or sewer, and that was a $17,410 purchase. And so remember, if they use a P card, then we still save that 1.39%. So the larger the item that we use, the more savings that we have.
Made me giggle seeing a P card used for something for sewer, so.
We could tell you a lot of things we've used, and what we like to do is we put it in our request for beds. Whatever we can get by with using that, we'll use it because it'll save us money.
Oh, Lord, help us.
So do you need a motion to approve?
Yes,
that?
please, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second.
Have a motion, a second to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Okay, so I think we move on to the bond refinance. You scroll down. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we wrote a memo. The documents and stuff go before the board, but we wrote a memo to summarize this. We've been working with Gilmore and Bell and our financial advisors to help us bring all this together. This is the 2011A bond series, and I will tell you, this is like when I talked about the 3 bonds wrapped up in the landing, and then once all of those meet their waterfall flow of funds, then it rolls over into the next bond. This is that next bond. So this is a 2011A bond series, was about $22.8 million left on it, and we were doing a 4.85% interest rate there. We had the opportunity. We did private placement here on this one because this was before our S&P and all of those reports. So we did private. Our financial advisor did call many local banks to ask them. We had Commerce and Regions that bid on this. Commerce offered us 1.825% interest. Regions offers us 1.57%. Budgetary savings of $4.6 million off of that debt, and we are shaving a year off of that. So the more years we can shave off of that, the better. So now it will end in 2030, and we will save $4.6 million budgetary savings off of that. So that is one that we will be taking before the board to ask for approval to move forward with that. We're under some time constraints and those kind of things, but I think this is a very good opportunity for us to save additional money. And the interest rate, 1.57, is amazing, so we might as well take advantage of that while we can. So
When does it come before us?
it should come December 14th.
Double read?
Yes, we're asking for that,
Okay.
just because of the 30-day time constraint. Yeah. That's a good one.
We could
It's a-
approve it today.
Yeah.
Were all the local banks request for a proposal on this?
Yes, sir. And our financial advisor, we specifically asked him to check with local banks and to he called them all and he wrote up all of these items, and the only ones that he did have several that said they weren't interested in doing this. Regions and Commerce were the 2, but yes, he did reach out the local banks, and we'll be providing a list for the board members for that as well. I'll have it ready to speak on all of the ones he called, but we specifically asked for the local banks to be thought of since it was private.
Thank you.
So do you need recommendation to move this forward to city council, or is this just for our review?
This was just for your review. It's already on the agenda for the council, but I always like to bring these things before you, before it goes to council for any things that you might have to add. We can get some of the questions and concerns. And when it goes to the council, we're also going to have Gilmore and Bell there and Columbia Capital. If you want to ask any higher technical questions and stuff, they can help with that. But at the end of the day, the budgetary savings off the end of this debt is 4.6 million, and we're shaving a year off. And those are our goals with debt, is how can, especially the ones that go outside of the Tif. So the Tif is 23 years, and those debt issues that go beyond that, we're trying to shave off as much time while saving. Our internal goal is we won't do it unless it saves more than 3%. This one is like 16.7%, so this one was kind of a no-brainer for us.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I see that we'll move on past the bond refinancing because you all seem to be on board with that. The next one is the fire truck purchase, and this is the one, is Ted here? He is, okay. So he can answer the technical questions about the fire truck. But this is one that we wanted to do the lease purchase, the 3-year lease purchase, as we've done in the past, to help replace an old fire truck that I believe was 23 years old. This will replace a fire truck in Station 1. And we got a really good 1.07% interest on that. So we've done some, and we'll save about $26,000 if we do this lease purchase financing, because we'll be able to pay for it in total up front. So they'll give us quite a good discount off of that. So the picture that I like to show you is, since the interest rate is 1.07, it's about a little less than $23,000 in interest over the life of that truck, the 3 years. But in the beginning, we're saving $26,000 by paying it ahead. So we're actually saving a couple of thousand off of the actual truck itself by doing it the way we're doing it right now. So that's a good picture for us to look at and say it's really beneficial, but it will help replace that apparatus, and it will help us move forward with better equipment. And Ted, you got anything to say on this? No?
Where does the old truck go? Back into the sale or donation? It's not a donation, but it goes back into auction? Yeah.
Sorry, the engine that's 23 years old or so will go to Purple Wave, I believe, with the finance department. We'll put that in surplus, and the current engine one will go to reserve status, and then this one will replace it. And do know it'll take about 16 to 18 months to receive this engine. The commodities, the build time is getting way out of hand, like everything else in the world right now.
So this also, last paragraph, it says your goal to complete the contract is prior to the start of 2022, which means?
For the first time in my career, I'm going to ask for a double read on Tuesday the 14th. The reason for that is if we don't complete this by, I believe, the 15th or 16th, we will see a 10% charge come on top of us if we delay. That's $90,000. So we'll be asking for that double read.
That convinced me.
That's
Yeah.
90,000 good reasons, so.
You may want to lead with that comment, and then the conversation will be really short.
Yes, it would.
Thank you.
This is going to be included in that discussion we're going to have on Monday as well. Thank you.
And you said this was 3-year financing?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Jamie, and then all those, flow through proprietary funds through the budgeting for the financing?
Would you ask that again? I'm
In the
sorry.
future, so all those dollars flow out of the proprietary funds that you.
Over the 3 years. Yes, sir.
Is there an opportunity for a longer lease period versus over 3 years?
There is opportunity for longer. We just didn't see the need for that because of the financial savings, but there is opportunity for that. We've done a 5-year, I believe, in the past as well.
Well, yeah, and I'm guessing the interest rate would change, but what was it?
1.07.
1.07% is less than inflation.
Yeah, we locked that in, and it was only for a small time period because obviously the market's changing all the time, but.
Sure. Would you, and I don't want to mix this thing.
That's okay.
Do we still have the opportunity to look at maybe a 5-year financing, see what that interest?
For this one,
Yeah.
if we do that for this one, we'll have to start all over.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good job.
Thank you. I'll answer for my staff because it wasn't just me, it was several people in my staff. These are budget amendments, various budget amendments, but we want to cover these, and you're going to see more and more of these as we start to close out our year. I know y'all are used to this, but So we have some of the legal needs to increase that legal budget by $105,000 due to some additional litigation and discovery needs. And that will come before you all as well. Again, here's the Branson Airport, TDD, the regional airport. We bring that before you all as well. And one of the things that we typically say with the airport, I like to show you some of the past so you can kind of gauge where they're at with that voice. So we're looking at the January through June, which is $22,503 for that airport. In 2019, it was $48,000. So 2020, it was $6,500 for the same time period, but 2019 was $48,000. And this is based upon the $8.24 per passenger. And so you can see that if visiting to Branson, if they originated in Branson, it would not fall under those dollars. So it is quite a bit less than 2019, quite a bit more than 2020. But typically that maybe helps you gauge where they're standing.
How long is that contract for?
It was 30, and we've done 10, so we've got about 20, a little more than 20 years left on it. It's the pay for performance agreement.
Doesn't the county also give $8 and some odd cents?
No, sir.
Not?
We're the only ones that did that, to my knowledge.
Is there also a clock ticking as to how long we can fund that out of the current fund?
Out of the current fund, there's a dollar value. And we had assumed years ago it would be gone way before it is now, but we're not close to it right now. Yes, sir. And so you'll see that the next one is the fire station design and construction. This is the one, if you recall, during the budget process, we said 1.5 million of that reserve would be moved to the capital fund for 21, and then we wanted to do the same thing for 22 in an effort to pay cash for that fire station. So this is just what we told you we were doing. We were taking it out of the reserve for 2021, moving it to their capital project to build that up to try and pay cash for that. That's what that one is about. The next one is, this is, and I'm going to read this one because I want to make sure and get this one right. This is a criminal investigation, and so we had a lot more expenses than we had anticipated based on a criminal investigation, which those things happen when you're dealing with that. So this is just the amount of money that we need, and it's several different funds to increase their expenditures to allow them to account for this increase in costs that they did not anticipate. And then the next one is your water sewer, and we had a couple of emergency purchases, and I wanted to make sure, Kendall, if you want to, he's way better at speaking to the capital items on water and sewer than I am, but this is the emergency purchase for two different projects for the utilities department. Kendall, you want to come up and just speak to those? We had an emergency purchase for a mixer for the Compton Drive wastewater treatment plant, and then the waste sludge feed pump, and he did a really good job with their memos here, and so I just wanted him to see if he wanted to summarize those. I have them right here if you need them. And then an oxygen, something or other. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Jamie, as you know, operating water and sewer systems, sometimes there's unexpected expenditures that come up, and comes along with the holding on any capital purchases for 2020 as well as 2021. It set us back on some components, specifically the waste sludge feed pump as well, and then, like I said, the mixer itself, it's a vital component in the treatment process. It helps reduce the amount of chemical we used to remove phosphorus in the water itself. So the less mixers we have, the less efficient the process is. So it means the more chemicals we have to put out as well. So again, appreciate the emergency purchase process to help us through keeping things functioning and at the same quality level of treatment that we've maintained in the past, so protect our environment.
Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you. And we brought those before you because we're going to do the budget amendment. The emergency purchase already covered that process, but we still need to do that budget amendment, and that's why we brought those before you today.
Do you need to vote on that, or just?
These are just budget amendments these are the ones that we moved to the Board of Aldermen, but we like to bring them before you in case you have any other questions that you want to make sure that you're aware of everything that we're doing. The next one is the Verizon, it's another contract for the water towers for IT. You want to speak on that, Chad?
Sure, no problem. So this is a agreement with Verizon Wireless. They approached the city because they've been on our Walmart water tower for, at least this agreement's 15 years. And it's coming to an end, I think, next year. And so they wanted to extend that and renegotiate the terms. And after discussing it with them, they proposed a reduction from 4% to 3% annually. We currently get just over $4,300 a month on that. And we spoke about that internally, and I think the value of keeping that 15-year revenue coming in was something we considered and wanted to bring to you for your consideration. Staff recommends approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on this.
Do we know well, I'm sitting in their shoes, I would understand, but wanting to drop the escalator from 4% to 3%. And I know inflation varies. I mean, some years it's very low. We're experiencing high.
Yep.
What was the rationale on that, Chad?
Well, I think, we've had a lot of internal discussion on this, and I've talked to some peers, and the revenue you get from these vary wildly depending on, it's real estate, right? So it depends on where it's located. And so I think there's an argument either way. I think there's an argument to just, reduce it and keep that revenue locked. I think there's an argument to go back and say, hey, look, no, we want to stand firm and we want to keep this at 4%. My gut tells me they won't walk away. I mean, of course, when we negotiate with them, they say, well, we can't do that. We're not doing that on any of our other towers. That's just not anything we're entertaining. These are the things that they say.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what will they do? Well, my gut tells me they would probably agree to it, but they push pretty hard, I'll say that.
Okay.
But whatever this committee, has an appetite for, whatever we do, I would say I try to stay consistent with other carriers as they approach us, which happens all the time. They're always asking for reductions in these, and we just flat out tell them no.
Yep.
That's.
So if I understand this correctly, 15 years ago, they were paying X number of dollars, and over 15 years with a 4% escalation, it has grown to the $4,300 payment amount.
Right. I want to say it started out at like $1,500 or something like that
for
many
sure.
years ago. And so just to give you an idea, at 4%, after 15 years, it'd be $7,996 if my math's right. At 3%, it'd be $6,744 monthly, and that's at 3%. So that's the difference you're looking at. Roughly $95,000 annually versus $80,900 annually is the difference. And like I said, whatever the flavor of whatever you guys think, we'll go back and or we'll move forward.
Any comments from the committee on that?
Are there any other Verizon, do we lease to them any other places?
We do. And I want to say, don't quote me on this, that we did agree to a reduction on one other one in the not-too-distant future, to 3%. I should know that. I apologize.
How many do we have for them?
3, I believe.
3, okay.
We've got Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. I think we have 3 or 4 with T-Mobile, 3 or 4, 2 with AT&T.
I just wanted to get a feel for, if we pushed back too much, I mean, they are other places as well, so we could basically have a problem when the other ones come up for renewal if we were
Right.
to lose one. Okay.
So this one's Walmart water tower, and frankly, I was talking to Mr. Pinkley before this meeting, and I don't know, I'd have to look at the landscape of 76 up through there. I don't know where else they would go. There might be a hotel that's fairly high, but they'd be hard pressed without building a tower to not stay where they're at, to be quite honest. That being said, considering it started out at $1,500 a year, and, here we are, many, many years later, it is, every percent does make a difference. Like I said, I don't really, we're looking for revenue at the same time, every penny counts, and so.
Any other
That's the
comments from
logic.
committee?
I just had, a couple. As I reviewed this and I read it, my first instinct was this shouldn't be a reduction. We should be considering an increase. Based on the location, it's almost the highest point on 76, literally. But to go from, I would have proposed to increase it from 4 to 5. This is for over the next 15, this is a 15-year deal. So if you just consider the CPI and the cost of living, I don't think Verizon, and I know this is through a third party, but Verizon has to approve this.
Correct.
But I don't think Verizon is reducing their rates.
No.
That's a
No,
good
they're
point.
not.
So I'm not personally comfortable, as this group serving on this, to take a cut for that purpose. So worst case, I would ask that we maintain the 4%, but I'd also ask that you consider an increase.
Yeah, I'd almost look at that too. Go back with 5, and then if you have to settle on 4, they feel a little better, and we got what we needed.
Are they utilizing that, it's something Michael and I talked about, are they utilizing our water tower to adhere or place any of their 5G small cell facilities on that?
This has came up before, and it's a complicated question in that 5G is a very diluted term in the industry. 5G and small cell,
Small cell.
they're not doing small cell, let me say that. Small cell is what you would use light poles for, things like that. It's a shorter distance, higher frequency, typically higher speed. That's not what these are. These are meant for longer distance, many, many customers, maybe 2 miles, 3 miles in terms of range, maybe a little more. So the short answer is yes, they do 5G off this, but not in the capacity that I think you were thinking. That's more of a small cell technology.
I would agree with Michael, at least 4%. They're not lowering my Verizon bill, I can tell you that.
So how do you feel about 5%?
Start out with 5 and get them, see if they'll,
As
But
much
do we wanna-
clarity as
Do we want to start
possible.
with 5 and go to 4, or just go back and say it's got to be 5?
give them some ammunition.
This is obviously an open meeting, so I would say if there's the clearer direction, the better from my perspective in
You bet.
terms of what to do.
Do you think I know they're our cell phone provider. Do you think they would then increase our prices?
We have no, that's
Good-
not going to
good,
happen.
okay.
Now, I'm not saying they'll never increase
I
our prices.
just wanted to make
but
sure. I didn't want
They'd
them
have
trying
to
to-
increase the prices on the federal government
Okay.
and many, many tens of thousands of customers at the same time.
Okay.
And that's not likely to happen over this, not at all. Worst case scenario is they walk away, which I don't believe that
They'd
would
have to
happen.
build their own tower.
Yeah, that's going to cost a few nickels.
And they gotta come back to the city.
I agree. They keep raising their rates to their customers every year. Any other comments, suggestions? 4%, 5%?
4.5.
My rates go up every year.
So my thought is that, yes, I would go back with 5%. So if you're looking for clear direction, and then you can always negotiate.
That gives you something to negotiate down to.
Yeah, you can negotiate down, but I would be very clear that that's the.
And the board's
But
got a
what we're-
bottom line of 4.5, yeah.
What we're setting up, though, is to say we're going to go back with 5, but we'll negotiate down, is pretty much letting him know that we'll accept less. If he was given direction that we're going back at 5%, then that's all he has to work with.
But not down to 3.
True.
Yeah. 4 would be minimum.
I'm hearing 5, and to be clear, I will apply this methodology for every
Yeah.
renewal in the future.
That will help, that's a small piece to helping our budget.
That's exactly right.
Thank you for the
My motivation.
Yeah,
direction, and I guess, would I bring this back to the committee after we negotiate the 5%? And then bring
That'd
it
be
back?
fine. Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
We'll do that.
5% or nothing. If they don't like 5, let's talk 6. Then they'll
Done
like
deal.
5 better.
Or then we'll talk AT&T. Oh.
You good with that, Chad?
Yep, thank you very much.
Okay.
I know it's afternoon. We have one more item.
Get it.
Moving forward? Okay. Just want to make sure all your schedules will fit with that. The next one and the last one for right now is the Convention Center Incentive Review. This is built into their contract, and it's 100.
Jamie,
I'm sorry.
this
what about item
Compton?
10?
Oh, did I miss one?
You're just trying to get to lunch
I
awful
am
quick.
so, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, you sounded like
Compton
you were
Drive,
sorry.
yes. I had already looked at that one, I apologize, I was trying to skip it. Okay, so this is the HDR submitted their final contract price, and this is the wastewater treatment plant and the grants that we received for that. And we've received the $699,225 for their final engineering and construction supportive services. So this is a budget adjustment that we have to do for book purposes to make sure that we have that on our books, and we'll turn around and get reimbursed from the grant for this item. Kendall wrote this very detailed memo. Is there anybody that has any questions regarding this? This falls within the grant budget, so it is just getting that expense on our books.
Just for clarity, I know we've been loosely talking about a figure of, what was it, 14, 15 million? Stan?
I think the overall
14
cost was somewhere around 14.
Okay. So this is saying it's 12,000,009, including a 5% contingency fee. On top of that, is it the 1.4? Or is that an engineering?
That's, yes, because that's engineering, and then
Construction
you have to
engineering,
add
okay,
it to the
13,
construction cost.
14.
Yes, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Probably a waste of time question, but including the 5% contingency fee, anybody want to take a guess of what this will actually end up costing?
Well, that's why we're hoping to have it all completely covered by the grants. We have a majority of that covered, and just so that this committee is aware, we're going to do another LMI survey in January to maybe help get those regulations down to help cover that additional 3.6 that we're going after. So if we can get that back where it needs to be, then there's a good possibility that that additional 3.6 that we were looking at will also be covered. So that's what we're moving forward with January.
That'd be great. So
We
this,
don't know whether this might be covered by the infrastructure bill as well?
There's a lot of possibilities
There's a
here.
possibility of that as well, yes.
so you're asking for this committee to, this is just for our knowledge, this is going to the Board of Aldermen
This is
on the 14th?
be a budget amendment, and this will go to the board. Yes, sir. It's just one that we like to keep in front of you, all budget amendments, budget adjustments, all of those things.
And
Will this
just
be-
real quick, just so you all know, some of you know, some of you don't, Liberty Utilities has made a request to the Corps of Engineers to raise the dam at Power Site.
Yeah, a foot.
That,
2 feet.
yeah, 2 feet. So we're going to, because of the grant, we need a hydrology study done now to see how it would impact possibly the Compton Wall. That's what's causing this.
Oh,
I bet there's going to be a lot of pushback.
so the wall have to go 2 feet taller to meet the same requirements?
Just real quick, so in that $699,000, $27,700 is that hydraulic report.
Okay,
We added that to the scope, for one, to give us confidence that the wall height is adequate for this potential lake rise.
so Kendall, I know all of our studies have determined that the current height is what was required. if they do raise Taneycomo 2 feet, does logic says, would this wall need to be raised 2 feet?
So it gets a little technical.
Okay.
The technical part of it is, does it affect the 100-year floodplain?
Yep.
So the wall height is set at the 100-year floodplain level plus 3 feet of freeboard. This potential lake rise, if they consider it as not a 100-year floodplain rise, where it's more of an operational situation where it gives Liberty the ability to raise the lake level enough at a certain level that in the event of a flood or a storm event, then they have to put it in place in their operating procedures that they drop the lake level back down to what the normal level is now. So there's a timing issue there. That's what this hydraulic study is going to do for us, is really focusing on what does that do to the treatment
They're
plant
just
and that
wanting
wall.
to try to improve the lake level during the summertime when there's hardly any water running, so they can generate off that. But 2-foot rise doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, it does. It not only affects the Compton area, but also affects the campground area.
And I
And the
believe-
landing.
Yeah, and I believe Chief Matthews, Ted Martin, Stan were on calls with emergency management when we were having our floods. And what I heard from them clearly was they do not make changes to elevation based on a forecast. The water has to actually hit the ground before they start making decisions.
That is correct.
So in this example, that doesn't feel good, that they're going to wait for the flood to then start dropping Taneycomo.
Yep, so exactly how, you have your tributary flow and how much water has currently hit the basin and how long it takes for that water to dissipate down to the normal level, and in anticipation of more water potentially coming from Table Rock as well.
Yeah.
So,
How much is going to be released from Beaver? Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 So we're going to take this to the board on the 14th. It includes this hydraulic study, which in turn, we have to have a public comment letter prepared for FERC, I believe by January 5th. So in order to get this rolling, we'll be asking for a double read on the 14th.
A lot of double reads on the 14th.
Kendall, I had a question on, what's FEMA's position on this in general?
I honestly don't know yet.
Thank you.
Wow. Lakewood Estate homeowners will not be pleased with this either.
No.
We don't have 2 feet to spare. Keith, can you work on that? Got it? Okay, thank you for the input on that. Convention Center,
Yes, so this is their incentive review. And Sam, in this memo, I stated because of the new contract, there are more categories than there have been in the past, and the percentages of those categories. Sam went down through and wrote a memo and told each of the criteria and what they have done and how they have accomplished each of the criteria. This memo that I created was for your benefit to see what the new contract says based on the categories and those categories out there and how they're summarized. So we can go down through if you would like, and I can go down through one by one and show you, and we can talk about, like, the customer client satisfaction is 20%, and then we'll go down and define how the contract defines it and show you what Sam has done to accomplish that category. Or, I'm sorry, I should have said the convention center has done. So Stacy, will you go down through, my memo, first of all. Can we put both of them up side by side? Is there a possibility to do that?
yeah, you're talking about the scoring? Is there scoring?
Yeah,
on here?
yes, sir, the memo. So like 20% of the overall 137 is based on the customer and client satisfaction. And then the 20% is based upon their completion of their goals and objectives. And then so on and so forth. And so in each one of those categories, he wrote a memo and defined what they have done to account for. I'm sorry, Mr. Pinkley?
I was just going to ask if you could just quickly tell us the change
Yes.
that was made from last year to this year.
Yes, sir.
Kind of highlight that so we know what
Yes.
change and why?
Absolutely. So in previous years, there were only 5 categories, and customer client satisfaction, completion of goals and objectives, financial condition was rated at 40% instead of 20 in the previous contract. This new contract, they rated it at 20%, and they also included the feedback for the chamber, for the hotel group, and then the unique performance as well. So you'll see those are a little bit different, but they're all defined and laid out. Customer and client satisfaction, in order to achieve this portion of the incentive fee, the survey results must show that SMG has achieved an average customer client satisfaction of a rating of at least 90% or greater over the course of the operating year. So in order for them to achieve the full 20%, they have to achieve greater than 90%. And he has showed you in the categories for the entire year what they have accomplished through their surveys. So customer client satisfactions categories, facility, sales, and operations in total received a 93%. Building operations and services in total, they received a 96.4%. Food and beverage services, in total, they received a 93%. And then the audiovisual, in total, 92%. And overall guest satisfaction was 97% on their surveys. So they have accomplished above that 90% on their categories. So that would be up to y'all, but I would say since they achieved that, they would get the full 20% of that category. But that's how that would work. Do you all agree to that full 20%? And then what we'll do, once we have accomplished the amount that they get, then we have to present it in the form of a budget amendment, which will go in January. And then once the board approves it in the form of a budget amendment for whatever the piece of it is, then it'll get approved by the board and then get paid out to them.
Stan, as I look at this, in each of the categories, and by the way, thank you for expanding and changing those percentages. Yeah. But as I look at these, in each of the categories, they've clearly scored 90% or better in every single one of them. You agree with that?
I agree.
So I think, I mean, it's sounding like we're all on board of, I think they've earned and deserve the full.
I've been extremely pleased with
Yeah.
their response. And
The board committee feels the same way?
Yes.
Just a real quick question, because we have the public watching this. These numbers have been verified. We're not just accepting something they said. There's been an official process. They've
we
been
actually
through-
receive the surveys ourselves. They come to us independently.
I think that needs to be made clear.
John collects them and has possession of them.
Lock and key, John.
On this memorandum, it has John Manning, Deputy CAO. What's CAO?
Oh, that's right, contracting element officer.
Contracting
Element officer.
A. Element doesn't start with an A.
Well, it doesn't.
Administration. Yeah.
A, B,
Chief
C, D.
Administrative Officer, I believe.
Okay.
We'll go with that.
H-I-J.
Okay, so the clear direction on that, Jamie? Recommendation from this
full
committee
amount?
to the board would be the full amount.
The full 20, yes.
Yes.
For the whole 137, or we'll walk down through each category?
I think we need to walk through each category.
Well, we'll walk through, but I
Okay.
think what I'm hearing is this committee will be recommending to the Board of Aldermen.
The full 137?
Yes.
Okay,
Does everybody agree?
Yes.
okay. Do you want to still walk through each one? Or do you
I'm
just
fine
want to
if
go with
Everybody
it?
else is fine. I mean, I read
I'm
through
good.
them all.
Yeah, I read
Okay.
through it, so I mean, yeah.
Well, that totally works for me. So then we'll present a budget amendment to the board in the January in the amount of the full amount. So that would work.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
What
Oh.
about the additional incentive fee? Is that, that's not included in the, or is that is that 144?
The 144 is their management fee that they get on a monthly
Okay.
basis. The 137 is their incentive fee.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about right now. So they get that management fee
Okay, the
divided by
144 and then
12
okay.
monthly, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that concludes.
Jamie, you've got reports down there. You have more.
Do I have more? No, I don't think I have anything else to add at this time.
Well, if you have no reports, then the next line item would be mine. Take a motion to, oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I
Did
missing
you
something?
have something on reports you wanted to?
I don't know, do I?
Just Resource X maybe in Taney
Oh,
County Health
yes.
Department?
I'm sorry, yes. Okay. I am so thankful for them. I'm sorry. Yes, perfect, thank y'all. Resource X, these two things will be going before the board for the contract purposes. They just weren't all completed to get them on the agenda for the finance. But I wanted to make sure and tell you the Taney County Health Department contract, that's going to be going to the board, and the Resource X. The Resource X is our priority-based budgeting software. That is also going to the board as well, and that will be going here in the December 14th. But we didn't have the contracts completely finished by this time, so that's why I put it in the report, to just let you know that those will be going to the board for approval on December the 14th. Taney County Health Department, they did agree to the $130,000, and she did come back and say, next year might be a different story, so we'll talk about next year's when next year comes around. But she was happy with that, and so the Resource X maintained their amount for this next year, so we were happy with that as well. So those two contracts will be going before the board, so I just wanted to let you know and make you aware of that, and thank you girls so much.
I've been asked by a few people about the benefit of the priority-based budgeting software. We pay $25,000 a year for that
Correct.
program.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody on this committee has any desire to discuss, do we want to continue paying the $25,000 a year for the priority-based budgeting software?
Well, what I would say is it's a decision-making tool, and that tool has allowed for us to see every program that this city accomplishes and the dollar value that each program that the city does and how much it costs. So using properly, if the tool is used properly, it is a great resource for decision-making. In other words, okay, especially for this next year when we have to take a very deep dive into more revenues, cost reductions, how are we going to do that? So this tool, what it allows for us to do is to say, okay, here's a program that we do, and here's how much it costs, and here's how it rates according to our overall community plan. Is that program, if it rates very low according to what the community wants, and it costs us, we'll say $300,000, and it's not a state mandate, and it's not a federal mandate, is that one that we need to look at low-hanging fruit to do something different? That would be the decision for you all to say, okay, this is costing us out of our general fund about $300,000. State's not mandating it. What can we do with this $300,000? We take that program off our books, say it doesn't do anything to meet the goals and the objectives of the community, and then we have that $300,000 to reallocate to something else that does meet their goals and objectives. All of that information comes from that Resource X and that software that we're able to do. So I would say, for this next year, it's extremely important to maintain that contract as we're moving through a deep dive on how we're going to affect long-term solutions. That is my recommendation. I'm open, y'all's discussion, but that's why we're bringing it back before you this year, especially in the discussions that we need to have in the future.
Fair enough. Any other comments from the committee?
I think we're fortunate that we have it, and I think it will be well used as we try to balance some things, look for revenue and different things. So I'm thankful we have it.
Me too.
Yes.
Jamie, just this is kind of a personal request.
Sure.
Because I don't know how it impacts others. But as we move forward into the coming year, I anticipate we will have significantly more capital projects and significantly more proposals for review from engineering firms, contracts, everything. So for me, when I received this information yesterday, it's an awful lot to take in before a 10 o'clock meeting the following day.
We'll do it more than a
Is there any
week.
potential to get it sooner?
Sure.
Because
This one was a timing issue for us,
I thought
but
it might be, that's,
for those large projects, what we'll do is we'll tell you, we'll have it out on a week in advance so that you can do that. And if we can't, we'll roll it to the next meeting so you have more time. I understand that need, certainly.
I'm a slow reader, thanks.
Me
Great
too.
point.
Yep.
Any other comments from the committee? Hearing none,
Motion to adjourn.
I will accept Stan's motion to
Second.
adjourn. I will accept the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.